To do our faux coiling, there's 3 major parts, 4 if you count the background, that you have to remember or to make the faux coiling. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to practice on some shards, and all I did was just took some gourd shards that I had and I coated them with just any black acrylic paint. It doesn't matter if it's matte, gloss, satin, just any black acrylic paint. Use what you guys know that I'm a big advocate for using what you have, and you'll probably need 2 coats. Black coats really well, but you want it nice and clean and nothing showing through. But if it did, it's not a big deal because this is your background, and I have tried different colors in my background and I didn't get any other thing that I liked other than the black. So I did play around with it quite a bit. The second thing that we're going to talk about is our strokes, putting in our strokes. And this is the individual reed in your coiling. So that's what we're drawing on, is each stitch that is sewn into your coiling. You're going to put those on one at a time, just like you would coil them one at a time. And then we're going to shade on both sides of the coil. So each one is shaded to give it that rounded look, and then the final step is highlighting right down the middle, and again that just really makes it pop. You can do this on all kinds of items, not just gourds. I've done it on wood. I've done it on satellite dishes that were round. I've actually had people that don't believe that it's not a basket because the shape of the dish is so good, and it mimics the shape of a regular basket. So we're going to show you with gourds. I've done it on a pizza pan from Dollar Tree. So any of the metal, aluminum, tin, anything along those lines, you'd use a primer, and then you could do this method on top of that. So there's a lot of applications, rocks, the list goes on and on. Don't get stuck inside a box. Just use it and create your own ideas on all kinds of items. So to prepare our gourd, as long as it's clean, you don't even really have to sand it unless you want to smooth it out or anything like that. I'm a big component of leaving them and letting them be natural and not doing a lot of stuff that brings up the dust and dirt. You just want to make sure you don't have any mold or anything on it. And this is just a cut shard that was a part of another class. I'm going to use just a basic black acrylic paint. Doesn't matter the brand, doesn't matter if it's matte or shiny or gloss, just a acrylic paint. And I usually use mattes. That's just kind of what's out there. You could use Apple Barrel, you could use Craft Mart, you could use Folk Art, any of those. So we're just going to paint our background color black, and that's all we're gonna do. It's probably gonna have 2 coats, and we're gonna let one dry, and then we'll do one more coat just to make sure we got a nice even coat. If you're working something like this with ornaments for Christmas or something like that, make sure you do the sides. And if you're gonna do the back, maybe even spray paint the back, and we'll talk about doing those kind of things when we are working on our basket, and we'll talk about what not to do as far as that goes. But we're just gonna base coat your gourd, and whether it is a big gourd, little gourd, in between gourd, whatever, this is just to kind of show you how we started. Okay. So to put on our rows, I'm going to use pick and stick measuring tape, and you can use it over and over. This one I'm going to do vertically and try to lay that as even as I can right down the middle. The width of the coil is very important. This one is about 1.5 centimeters, and we don't want to go much smaller than that because you have to allow for the shading on both sides. You do not want them to meet, and the highlight in the middle. So, and then I'll talk to you about using Miriam Joy templates, craft templates as well. So I'm using a charcoal pencil because I've got a white background, and just lightly. We don't want this very dark because we want to be able to cover over it without having to paint over the white. And then we're just gonna lift that pick and stick up and have your little white line right above that. And we're just gonna continue that all the way down our piece. This is just a shard that was cut out, was a throwaway piece that I'm practicing on. There's no reason that I'm doing this one or style. It's just what it is. So now let's go and do the other side. And I'm just gonna finish that all the way to the top. So for the stroke part, which I would consider like a reed, I like them natural, but we'll talk about colors as well when we get going. So any kind of tan, I have a lighter and a darker. I have a khaki, which is by Apple Barrel, and then I have a coca, which is by Americana Deco Art, and you can kind of see the difference in the colors, and I'll show you what the difference is on the gourd when I'm doing the process. This is the khaki, and you can see that it is lighter. And then I have the darker one because I wanted this basket to look older, because I think this looks more like a basket. And then of course we have our reds, and then we'll talk about black, because black you actually do a different method. You kind of work opposite to make it show up, but we'll talk about that as we get going. So we can do all kinds of colors, make it look natural, brighten it up, and just all kinds of fun designs. Anything that you see in coiling, you should be able to do in the painting as well. And just a reminder, this is painting only. No coiling, no wood burning, no carving. This is just straight paint, and that's why I really like it. So we're going to start with our little piece here, and we're going to use, I'm going to use that khaki color, and we're going to use a small round brush or liner brush to put these strokes on with to start with. The one thing that we want to make sure that our paint is thick enough that we don't need 2 coats of it. Usually the lighter colors are, the brighter you get, like especially yellows and reds, it's a little bit harder. So if it's too thick, you may need to add just a tad of water. If not, that's fine. And we're just going to come in and put a stroke down, and like I said, I'm using just a liner or a small round brush. This is a number 2, and we're just going to put those strokes right next to each other. You can touch them a little bit, and you don't want everything even. You want the lines to show in between most of them because that's what causes the illusion of the stitch or the coil reed. And you're just going to continue this, and you can see I have some that are curved, some that are straight, and we're just leaving that a little bit space between. If you get right on it, it's okay for one or two to hit right next to each other. Don't worry about it. Don't take it off. Just keep going. And we're just going to continue all the way across our row here. The one thing I will say is try to kind of keep your strokes even in size. You don't want to really go from too big to too little all of a sudden. And I will say another thing is when you've been working with your brush for a while with your paint, stop, rinse it out, and reload it, because sometimes the paint buildup will be on your brush and it will start to get thicker. So, and it doesn't matter if your strokes are thinner or thicker than mine, just do it consistent. And there is, in weaving and coiling, there is smaller and bigger sections, so if you have one that is, don't worry about it. I think that's the most important thing. Have fun with it. Don't stress out about it. This is just supposed to be a fun project, and it will take you a little bit of time to get these all on. So I'm not gonna lie about that. But the process, this is what makes it look so good. I think it is so worth it. Okay, so now we have one row. We're gonna go to our next row, and I'm just gonna start right here, and I'm not trying to quite reach that last row. And you can see where I don't reach the bottom, I'm just taking it off the edge. No big deal. And so I'm just gonna put this next row in. So we have just a tiny bit of space so you can tell that it's a row. Bumped right up to the other one. And we're gonna continue working and doing this whole piece until we're done with it, or the whole area. And just keep on going. So I've finished putting my strokes on. As you can see, I have a lot of paint here, and the one thing I will tell you is only do a tiny puddle of paint at a time, because you'll end up not using it. You don't use a lot of paint. You're not base coating or putting it on. So we're going to shade our coils now, and as you can see, we have one on each side of the coil, and that gives it roundness. We're going to float color to make that shade. For kind of the basket looking ones, I go with a darker color like brown iron oxide. Chestnut is kind of a reddish. This is actually shaded with chestnut here on the yellow. And then depending on what you're doing and how you want it to look, what color you use for shading, you want it to be darker. But I want to show you, this is shaded with browns, and I have all these colors in it, but they don't show up as bright as if you shaded them on this one. The one on the right, I shaded each individual color. The blue I shaded with a dark blue. The red I shaded either with a black or something like that. So you can see how much brighter this is, this design. And so it's kind of a personal opinion on what you want to shade it with. But for things that look like baskets and more of the native looking, the brown is kind of the way to go. But if you want something brighter, we have, again, I really like the colors in this, just a yellow and a blue. And this one is really pretty too. So let's start our shading. And I'm going to be using a brown oxide. And again, you can use any color of brown. I want to make sure this is dark enough to show you. And we don't need to put a big pile of paint down, just enough, because again, it will probably dry out before we use it all. So to do our shading or floating of color, you can either use a flat or you can use an angle. I was taught to float with an angle, and I personally like that better because you can get up on that tip, but that's just a personal opinion. I'm using a 1/2 inch. Either one of those is fine, or if you need to go to a smaller one, you can go to a smaller one as well. So there is no right or wrong between an angle and a flat. Use what you're comfortable with, use what you have, and we're going to talk about floating. So when we float color, we're going to first dip our brush into the water, and we want to get the right amount of water. And if you look at the brush, you can see it's all shiny. We lay it down, and as soon as that shine leaves from the brush, you have just the amount of water. So let's do that again. We dip it in, we lay it down, and we're going to wait for that shine to go dull, and then we know we have just the amount of water. You also can come and just go dap, dap if that's easier, and then you still should have just enough water in your brush, but not too much. We're going to dip our brush into the paint about maybe halfway, and then we're going to blend it out, walk it back and forth. So what we're doing, and I'm just using a paper plate that's got a little bit of a glaze on it, but your paint should go from paint to nothing. You shouldn't be able to see anything on this side. So you're going to go from dark all the way to light, and then we're going to bring it over to our piece. And then we're going to, I like to do like all of one side first. I'm going to start here since that one's kind of up at the top. We're going to float up at that edge, and we'll be doing back to back color. And so in between each one, we're going to reload, rinse our brush all the way out, get that color back in, walk it out again, and put that color back on the next row. We only want this to take up 1/4 or less because we need the color to stay on. We don't want to cover up all of our coiling row. So we're going to continue this all the way down. There is floating medium that may make it easier for you to do instead of water if you're having a hard time with it. So that could be an option, and I'll pull that for you in a minute, show you what that looks like. I personally have a harder time with it when I do it. So this is floating medium, and all kinds of different brands, and you use it in place of water. You're still going to rinse your brush out, but you would dry it out all the way and then put a little bit. So we're going to put a little bit in our brush after we've dried it out, dip our paint the same way that we did before, blend it out. See how that blends just a lot smoother. with the blending or the floating medium. And it does make a difference. You can see how that's going on smoother. And I'm going to flip and use my other side of the brush. You really don't want to go back over an area like I just did. You should wait and let it dry, because when you go back over it, you lift up the paint instead of kind of, you think you're going to add to it, but you're not. You're actually kind of just lifting it back up until it's dry. And then once it's dry, you can come back over it and do it again. And I'm just continuing here with that floating medium. If all else fails and you're having a hard time with the floating, get a little bit of water, make a wash, and use a smaller brush and just put a wash over this area. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And I'll show you that just so you kind of have an idea what I'm talking about. I'm still going to use my angle brush. So I'm making a little bit of a wash, and I'm not worried about the blending it out or anything. I'm just going to put it on. So I just come in and put it on in that area. Just solid paint. So it would look kind of like that. It doesn't look quite as neat, but if you're having a hard time, that's okay. That's all right as well. So now we've flipped this over, and we're going to continue floating color on this next to the one we're actually going to bump right up to it. And you don't want to see any bright pieces between the two. So you don't want to come down here and have this bright area. If you see that little kind of area that we didn't get shaded, we want to make sure that we get that all covered up. If you miss it, just come back in with your brush and catch that area. And you can see our white lines are starting to fade, and this little corner tip, I'm just gonna kind of tap that off, but we're just going up and touching that other area, and you can start to see that we're starting to get a little bit of roundness to our coiling. And the other thing that will really set that off is when we put that highlight in. And you could even go a darker brown with this. I'm going to show you. This is burnt umber. Doesn't matter which brown. It's just almost a black brown. I want to do a little bit of that just so you can see. Maybe I'll go back and put this on one side just so you can see the difference between the two colors. So, okay, I am going to do it on this side. See how dark that is? I really like the burnt umber. And you can really see that curvature really show up really well. So we're reloading each time. I've got a little bit of floating medium or water, and I'm only bringing that paint part way through my brush, walking it out every time. I'm going a little bit faster because I've done it for so long. So I'm gonna just go this guy real quick so we can show you the difference in the colors. But you don't want it really heavy. We don't want this really heavy. We want to keep this a little light. So we've got the lighter ones on this side. We've got the darker ones on that side. That guy's a little heavy there. It's probably better to go a little bit on the light side when you're floating. But look, doesn't that already start to look like the reed that you would see in the coiling, or the coiling stitches? You see every single stitch in there. So now we're going to finish it off by adding our white highlight. So to make the highlight, which really finishes off the curvature of the coil, we're going to be using a scruffy brush, a stipple brush, or an old one that's just kind of worn out. Every time I do this, I end up using something different. So we don't want a lot. We just want a tiny amount. And I usually end up using my kind of old brushes, and you want to do this while they're wet. Now, if we're doing this for a while, you may have to stop and kind of get some of the paint off because it'll kind of build up. But we're going to go into our paint and pull it out. We're not dipping our paint into the middle. We're kind of catching the edge and just pulling paint and walking it out until we're getting a small amount. We don't have a ton of paint on that brush. When doing stippling, that is so important. If you use that technique with other things, you'll have a much nicer stipple. Or if you're using patterns and stippling them in, that just turns out nicer. So we're going to come in and we want to find the middle of this coil now. And I'm trying to lightly kind of tap this on. Now, there's a couple ways to do this. You may want to do it straight up and down, and just lightly tap that across. And if you're having problems with where your line should go, don't be afraid to come in and put your light charcoal pencil on top. Now you can see I'm not pushing this hard, especially when you first start after you've reloaded your paint. And this brush, I'm kind of turning it to the side right now. You don't want a strong highlight. You want it nice and light, but we do want it kind of solid. So we want to make sure that there is paint on there. And as your brush wears down, you can push it harder. The paint starts to be used up. You can push it harder. So we're going to do this all the way across each coil, top, bottom, everywhere. It does not matter if it's in a shaded area. If you thought, we're going to put this on every single coil row so that we have this done. And you can see this is not a wide strip that I'm pouncing on here at all. This is very narrow. If you were using a bigger area, like I told you I did the satellite dishes, you may want to go with a wider brush and make it a little bit wider. So now you can see that really sets out the coil. And it really is that simple. And you get this wonderful look that looks like it's been sewn. It looks like it's coiled, but it's just paint. That's what I really, really like about it. There are some that I have done On this one for the highlights, instead of using white, I used a light yellow on the yellow, and on the blue, I used a real light blue instead of the white to keep the color more bright. You can see the white here on this one versus the colored ones on this one. This is more stark, I guess, but this is more vibrant. But you still have the highlight and the shape of the coil, which is really nice. Let's talk about making black coils, because our background is black, so we have to make the space in between to make these look like they're black coils. Otherwise, they don't show up at all. So we're going to kind of just do the opposite of what we would normally do on our other ones. So we're going to take a liner, and we're going to be using white, or you could use a tan if you wanted to, depending on what the rest of your strokes colors look like that you're working with. But we're going to use a liner, and you could even switch to a smaller liner if you wanted. And I took a little bit of water and I watered down my whites just like you would if you were doing liner work. And I'm going to use a real light touch, and we're going to come in here and we're going to add our lines. Make sure we can see them here. So we're going to come in, and these strokes are going to be smaller because these are going to be the strokes in between the coil that would normally be the black. So that's why we want, and we don't want these all even. We want some a little bit closer, a little bit further. And I'm doing the ones all the way across the top and in the middle. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to add some at the edges. And what this is, there's always a fatter part of the coil. If you look, there's always the fatter part. So we're adding the fatter part in between the coils, and we're going to do this on both sides. And again, try not to make it even. This can be a little bit thicker than our lines that we just put on. And then we're going to flip it around and do the other side. And I'm going to do one more row real quick so we have something to compare it to. And again, we're going to put the little strokes in. Try not to hook them. I have a habit of hooking them when I'm putting them on. Alright, so then what we're going to do next is we're going to come in and we're going to float black over the top of our white. And that's going to round it again. So I'm going to be using my flow medium and just halfway down in that color or less, blend that, walk that color out. Especially on the black, we want to really walk that color out. And then we're going to come in and we're going to do the same thing right up against that line so that that black kind of covers up a lot of the, but you still should be able to see it. So we're going to do both sides. Flip it over. Do the other sides back to back. This is real important. Make sure you've covered your white, that you don't have any white sticking through like those guys. You want to get those covered up. So if we had the other one here, we'd be doing it right there and just continue going. And then we'll take our white with our little scruffy brush and put our highlight on it, just like we did with our others, or depending on what kind of colors you're using. And right down the middle, give it that highlight. And that is how we do our black. And when we get this done and you have it in with your others, it looks just like your coils as well. Alright, let's talk about making designs. As I mentioned before, you can do any design that you can do in coiling. The only thing that you have to remember is you have to do it, the design within each row. And that's the only limitation that you have. When you section them off like this one, I put this middle one right down the middle so you're not having one back to back here. If you're having a middle design, that won't work. You'll be off-centered. So you want to kind of think about that, meaning like this guy is right in the middle. Therefore, we want to have him in the middle, not two lines backed up to each other. So when we're doing this, we're going to think about how big your rows are. This one is about a centimeter and a half. So the one I want to do is kind of this basic design, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sections in the middle, and at a centimeter and a half, we want to do 5 of those. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we've got 7.5 centimeters. So we want to, you can measure that off and put it exactly on your piece. I'm just going to kind of eyeball it, and so I'll do it on one side and then the other side. And then we'll just bring those lines together. So we're just going to connect those lines. This is not perfect. This is, like we talked about, this is not rocket science. I may drive some people crazy that normally measure exactly. So we're going to divide this into sections now, 5 sections. So we're doing, remember, 1.5 centimeters. So we have 5 different sections, and the little ruler that I'm using now is just a little cheap plastic one that we got as a freebie somewhere, but I like the size of it and I like that it's flexible, so I use it quite a bit. So we're going to divide that into sections, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 sections. So we have our middle one in the middle still. So our next one, and you can measure it out again if you want to. This is totally up to you, but I just usually eyeball it and bring it on down because our next section is going to be 3 of those. And then our last one is going to be 1. So we're going to do, and again, like I said, you can measure it out, but with your, we're going to adjust anyway with our strokes as we're going along. So be flexible with this design. That's, I guess, the biggest piece advice I could give you. On this one, I kind of just did the same thing, and I just decreased all the way from the middle to the ends. I had actually made a line, and then I drew it straight where each one was straight up and down, and did that one kind of that way. But I also have used this little ruler as a guideline and used him as kind of a set of strokes. Usually there's about 5 strokes that fit in about 1.5 centimeters. So that's what I am using as my template. So we are going to go ahead and let's use some color this time so you can see how the color works. So we are going to do yellow in the middle, and then we'll do red and kind of a blue or a turquoise color. So remember, with red and yellow, they are kind of a hard color to coat. They don't like to go on thick. So I'm actually going to go more subtle colors. These are thicker colors. They go on thicker and they're not as thin. So I'm going to use like a King's Gold, like a straw color. This is King's Gold Apple Barrel, and I'm going to use Flamenco Red, which is kind of a barn red. And it kind of goes with that kind of baskety feel anyway, instead of real bright colors. Remember, only use a tiny bit. And I probably put way too much red in mine, but we'll leave it for now. But just a tiny bit of color, because it doesn't take much and it dries out. So that center one, a lot of times what I'll do with the design is I'll start with the center one right down the middle, and then I'll do 2 strokes, 1 on each side, and then I know that that's my space. And a lot of times I'll even do that without even drawing the rest of my design on. I'll just use that to space everything out. So think about that as well. And that one went a little bit long. You could just use your Q-tip and remove him. If you used a brighter yellow, you can even see how that black is kind of shining through. You may have to do more than 1 coat on that, and that gets a little bit tougher. So now we're going to do the next shape around the outside, and we're just going to keep working from inside the shape around. So now that I kind of have my spaces and I know where they're at, I can just go kind of above it now, and I'm going to fill in this square with my red, and they don't have to be exactly above the other ones, but now you kind of know the area you need to fill in. So, and sometimes I will do, for example, I will do this one first, and you want to bring it inside that line because that line's between your 2 areas. And this one first, and then fill it in. So if that works better for you, then do it that way. So just do what kind of works for you. So now we know, see how that middle white line is in between the 2 spaces here. And it's easier to always pull a stroke towards you than to push it away from you. So turn your project, get it to work for you. And you can do a design just like this. You don't have to do any more. That can be one of your first designs. So just something that simple. So now I'm going to add a blue color to our design. I'm going to use turquoise from Apple Barrel. So now I'm going to do the turquoise color. Now we want to make sure that we stay out of everything if it's still wet. So I'm going to start on this outside edge and work my way around it. But if you get into things too much like I usually do, let it dry. You don't have to do that if that's too much. Those colors are already starting to pop nice and pretty. So we're gonna do 3, 4, 5. And if you get there and there's not enough room, if you started on here, it's probably better to start on this side and work your way out. But if you happen to work your way in, then just put one that's not as thick. If it's like half of a stroke size, that's okay too. There is no right or wrong with that. So, and then we'll do this last one here on this side. And you see how I have more strokes on there. I have 6 on that one to adjust to that one there, and that's okay. So I'm going to flip this around now, and we're going to go to the side. So we're going to get 5 in there. 3, 4, and make sure when you start to run out of paint that you're lifting up your brush and reloading. Don't go so far. So this one I'm gonna bring it out because this design looks a little bit wider over here for me. So I want to make sure that I get that not quite as wide. And I'm going to do the same thing with this one over here. I'm going to start on this side. And I have quite a bit of space over there. 3, 4, 5. And I think what happened why I have 6 is I started it right on the white line instead of in it. So if I'd stayed with these up here, but because I have 6 on the other side, I'm going to get 6 on this side so that it just kind of evens out. So we've got our basic design. So on this one, instead of using the kind of tan color, let's do yellow for our... You can hear my dog drinking in the background over there. Slurp, slurp, slurp. He's thirsty. It's been really, really hot. So we're going to use white instead of our tan color for the background. Just to make it brighter, just so you can see how bright everything is. And I started next to there. You don't need to. You could be working the other way around. We'll start that way at the next row. I was just trying to make sure I got the nice strokes. And again, fall off the edges. When you get to a part, just fall off the edge. Keep those nice and straight. Don't curve with the shape if you're doing something like this. Stay with the straight up and down, because that is not how the coiling would be. So we want to make sure that we keep it straight up and down. And we have a little bit more room there, so I'm going to make that guy just a tad bit wider. So I'm going to actually do this because I think I would get into it if with my finger there. So I'm going to come over here and start here first and then work my way down. I wanted to kind of show you, if you wanted to make them brighter, how we talked about you might have to go back over them a second time. What I mean is you would just have to put a second coat on them. And that does just really brighten them up. Sometimes you don't even need to do all of them, but you got to make sure that they're dry when you do that. So... and then we're just going to finish this all the way up, wait for it to dry, and then we'll come back and we'll shade it and highlight it. So I grabbed some paints that were darker, and don't get stuck in my colors, like a darker red. This is cherry red, like a navy blue. This is actually Admiral Blue from Apple Barrel. And on the yellow, I'm going to use chestnut, which is kind of a reddish brown. But if there was a darker yellow, just something that shades, you want it dark enough. The reason I'm not going to use brown on this one, I want you to see, I did brown on this one, and there's nothing wrong with it. It looks a little bit dirty and a little bit more muted than when you stick with the bright colors. So we're going to just do the brighter colors on this design. These are actually coyote gourds that grow wild in Arizona. They're thin shell, but you have your orange gourds or different things like that out there that you could use in place of those for ornaments, just so you know what those are. So let's get that middle one done, and then we'll work our way out. Just again, a tiny bit of paint, and I'm going to use my 1/2 inch angle with, again, my floating medium, and we are going to shade our float color on both sides. So while we're doing this, it's just going to be this one, and we'll flip it around and do this one. Now, if I was doing by myself, I'd probably go ahead and do the whole thing, but I wanted to kind of work my way out with you so that you can see that. Sometimes with that darker red, I will shade with black or like burnt umber. So those are also options with the red. And got a little bit too much paint there now. A little bit of that float in there. Load that about halfway through, blend that out. Okay, so we're gonna, just this time, we're gonna go up right next to the one that we just dropped off. So we're gonna do right up to, you want to butt up right next to the one that you just did. You don't want to bring it over to the next color. So I'm doing all of the ones on the left side for the red right now, and I'm making sure I get those white lines gone as well. Flip it over and we'll do it again. It's easier for me to work this side than the other side, so that's why I'm switching. And we're gonna do, didn't that look really cool already? That side and that side, and one more down here. Now I want you to notice something. I didn't bring this one quite far enough. You can see the space where I did not float. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to fix that. And just take that all the way to the edges so that we have that shaded, so it doesn't look like it stops and starts. We want it all the way across. I kind of noticed I did that over here with my edges. And if you don't want to do these, you could pick a color and do it that color, a dark brown like we talked about. Okay, so our blue now, we're going to go to that kind of navy colored blue, and we're going to do all the blue. And again, I'm going to work from the left to the right, shading the left side of them at this point in time. So make sure that we get all the way, and we're going to get all the way to, I'll go with that just a little bit. I'm going to go up there because I'm up there. Get that guy. Isn't that pretty though? Already starting to turn out really pretty. This kind of makes it bluer. I don't know if you wanted it more turquoise, if you shaded it with a black or a dark, real dark gray, if that would keep it more the turquoise color or not. So now I'm gonna flip it over and we're gonna do it on the left side. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and finish floating those and we'll come back and do the background. I wanted to show you, I have this little white spot that's still showing up. If you can see right in here and right in there, and that could be probably from the pencils. And if we want to make sure that we get that covered up. And sometimes just taking your brush with the tip and just hitting that will sometimes disappear those really well. Another thing that you can do is remove the white lines after you've let it dry really, really well, real lightly. We don't want to push down because we don't want to take any of our color off. And this is with Mr. Clean Magic Eraser. There are some brands that are a little bit more, not as expensive as they are, and they work fine well. I can't talk. They work well as well. They work okay as well. But you don't want to push down very hard because you will lift your paint. When I'm painting, I use this to pick up my paint to get rid of it, so it will take your paint off. But see how we've kind of lightly gone in there. Another thing you can do is come in with your black and knock it to the black background if you wanted to before you shade it. So now we're going to go ahead and just shade all of our yellow now, our background design. And we use the background color, and it should be a contrasting color. We used it in the middle, and that kind of picks that up, and that is a good thing. So you have kind of another color to represent it. So let's just hit this tip because it's about the width of an angle, and we're just going to decide if we like this color. I think I like this color because we're sticking more with yellow than brown. This is, like we talked about, more of a reddish or a yellow brown. So again, we're just going to do this all the way across, and then we'll bring it right up. You don't want it to come onto that other color. If you need to take your Q-tip and remove it, do that. But you want to butt it right up next to that. So I'm just going to finish bringing it all the way down and flip it and go all the other way. So we're going to talk about our highlights. You could do these in white. There's nothing wrong with that, but I want you to see what they look like in different colors. So we're picking just the lighter colors of what we already have on our thing instead of just the white. And so you can just see the difference. So for the red, I'm going to use a real light pink, and so on and so forth. So again, we're going to barely load that puppy on our little stipple brush or grubby brush and walk most of that paint off. And then we're going to put it right down the center of our stroke, and then we're going to butt up to the next color that we add on that. And remember, this is just a highlight. We don't want, if you're seeing solid paint, you're doing it too hard. We want this really, really nice and light. And I'm doing just the pink. I saved the yellow for when I'm just doing the yellow. So you just seeing that little highlight. And so we've got the pink on here. I just want you to see the difference between doing a white or a light tan color, an ivory color you can use too, but just to see the difference. Okay, so we have the red on. So we're going to rinse our brush because we've got to change out our colors. And if it was real light like that, you probably could go to the next color, no problem. But we want this brush dry. So what we're going to do is rub it on your skin. Your skin is the most absorbent, and it will really, really dry it out so that it feels like there's nothing in it, that it's nice and dry. And we're going to go to our blue color, and we're going to do the same thing here. If I can get some blue paint out or not. Again, tiny amount of paint. And we're just going to stipple those again all the way across. And you're going to butt right up to that color so it doesn't look, you shouldn't be able to tell where it stops and starts at. So this color, this light blue, if I was doing white strokes and I didn't want to use the white because it's not going to show up much, use like a white blue, a light blue like this. So I want to make sure I get that so you can't tell where that stops. And we're just start there, and you can sneak over to that a little bit. It's not going to show up that much if you want to in that color before it, but see how you're already starting to see the curvature of the coil? That's why it's so important for all three steps: the stroke, the shading, and the highlighting. And then we have also our background that is important as well. So we've got these, and that really pretty. I like the bright colors. I almost have a little bit too much there. You can always take your Q-tip, wipe it off, and put it on again. Okay, so we've got those done. We're gonna do our yellow now. Our yellow is our last color, and I'm probably gonna start in the middle with the yellow so you don't sit here and watch me do the whole thing on it. And this will be our last step. This process is really easy. It's just a little bit more time consuming because you're taking time to do individual strokes and then floating it and highlighting it. It does take the time, but it is so worth it. But it is not a hard process. It is not a hard process at all. So I'm going to do like we talked about, making sure we connect it from side to side. Making that a little bit brighter so you can see it. It wasn't showing up at all. And so I'm just going to go ahead and finish this guy through the whole part now, and I'll catch you on the other side. Now that we've done it all, you can really start to see how the coil is taking place. But I wanted to point something out. When you're looking at it and you see the highlight, you don't realize the highlight is different colors. If you look at it and you can tell that it's different colors, your colors are probably too bright or too dark. You need to lighten them up. You should just be able to look at that and think you just see kind of a white highlight. But I wanted to show you the difference with that than just a regular white highlight. And you may be just fine doing the white. It's just a personal thing, and make it your own and have fun with it. After you've finished your piece, you always want to varnish it. It's one of the most questions I get asked is, do I varnish it? If you've colored it, varnish it. You always want to hold your color. So that's a real important thing to do. You can spray varnish them, before you do anything, take your pictures. None of these have been varnished yet because you will get your glare. And that is very hard when taking pictures. So take all your pictures and then varnish it. You can spray varnish it, but since this is not a color that will bleed, I am going to brush varnish these. The reason being, it goes on so much thicker. I'm probably going to use like polyacrylic. I usually go for satin, but if this is something that you would rather use the matte with, so you get the flat look, then do that. This is really going to help pop your colors and bring out all those vibrant colors as well, and you'll really see the color pick up. So make sure you do, I would do 3. If it's something that's going to get handled a lot, do 5. On my outdoor one, I do 15. It's just kind of where it's going to be, how much it's going to be used, those kind of things. So that is how brands, like I said, polyacrylic, anything that's a nice brush on for acrylic is going to be fine. My spray on, I just use Krylon in Minwax. Any of those brands are fine. Those are the cheaper ends, so you can go towards a more expensive end. What do you have? What can you use? I'm always a big advocate for using what you have. So that is how we finish them off.